Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to put one of the most common claims in PC gaming all over the internet to the test. And we're gonna take a used Noctua NHD15 and see if it is good enough to tame my 3900K. So let me just start the story here. So this is the Noctua NHD15, the Chromax Black Edition. So I just picked this up today. So this is a used NHD15 and it cost me 400 Chinese yuan, which is approximately $55, so to speak, in sort of a rough conversion. So I decided to pick this up because I have a dual tower cooler working for my 3900K, and for the most part it can handle it just fine, but the problem is the noise. And I personally do not mind the noise, but my wife Nick sits next to me and I think she minds the noise. So one of the claims you often get online is that if you want silence you should definitely get Noctua. Now of course, now we have the new NHD15 G2, which is out in the market, but it's extremely expensive. And I figured out that now that people are getting FOMO for the G2, then probably there are a lot of people who want to dump their old NHD15s in the market, and it's a good chance for me to pick one up. Now, the reason I think this was a good deal for me specifically is because with this cooler, I still got the two Noctua fans. I think they're 140mm fans, so I got two of those. And I'm just gonna go with a single fan configuration. I do not think I need both fans, especially because I'm going for silence here, so I'm not going for maximum performance. If I wanted maximum performance for Cinebench or whatever, I would just get a 420 AIO. But I am trying to build a small gaming rig. I want it to be small. I'm not even overclocking my CPU or anything crazy. I just want to lock my cores, turn the E-cores off, and just have it for pure gaming, but I want to keep the silence in check. Now there are a lot of games like Monster Hunter Wilds or for example the new Battlefield, which use a lot of CPU, and it will start to hammer especially Intel CPUs pretty hard on the power. So I want to keep this noise in check so my wife will not think that my computer is literally dying while running the game. Now, I have to say that I already opened the cooler, and I have to say I really like the design of it. So let me just go ahead and show you what I mean. Now, here is the actual cooler. So it looks pretty small in my hands, but just looking at it in real life, it's actually kind of massive. Well, not exactly super massive, but it's still pretty big. And I have to say that for a used item, I received it in more or less immaculate condition. There's no dust at all in the fins. I'm sorry, my camera is not good, but there's no dust at all in the fins, and even the plate here it's in pretty nice condition, man. So whoever had this D15 beforehand really took care of it. So I'm pretty happy about my purchase. So the goal of this video is to check what kind of improvement I get by buying one of these expensive Noctua coolers versus just a generic dual tower cooler from China, which I've had already for 3 or 4 years. And actually my cooler works fine, but it has a hard limit at a 200 watt TDP. If you go beyond 200, it starts to get overwhelmed, and it does get pretty loud, man. So I'm hoping that with this one, maybe I can do, if I could do the Intel default 235, I would be already really happy with the performance, man. So if I can do that with some semblance of lower noise, I will be really happy. For gaming, I'm not even going to go that high. For gaming, the most I've seen is 170, 180 watts when you run some ridiculously expensive game. But I'm hoping that if the internet claims are true, this one should be a huge improvement over my generic dual tower cooler. So let's go ahead and go with the testing so we can have a point of comparison between before and after. So let's go with the testing. All right, boys. So just for the first point of comparison, I'm going to first tell you what we're working with. So this is a pretty small chassis. So this is a Johnsbow D32 Pro. It is designed to be smallish form factor build here. So this one fits up to micro ATX, which is what I have here. And let me show you the inside. So this is a removable panel. This was made by my wife, by the way. My wife made it for me. So these are the insides of my system. So we have a TUF B660M plus Wi-Fi D4 motherboard, an Asus board. It's not the best board in the world. The main reason I'm using this board is because I got it for free. So it was actually free with a purchase of a 12700 many years ago when Alder Lake just came out, and I managed to get a very cheap 3900K later down the line when people were saying, oh no, 3900Ks are going to burn your house and everything. So they started to give really good discounts over here in China. I got one of those here when the 4900K came out. Absolutely amazing CPU, no issues at all. So I have 2 sticks of G-Skill Trident Royal DDR4, which I got recently also in the used market. I will eventually make a video on those. There is a 4090 here. So it's by Yeston, the company that usually makes waifu GPUs. So they made this version of the 4090, which is quite classy. It's just all black, no fuss, right? All killer, no filler. So this one right here is my generic dual tower cooler. So this is a fully Chinese company called Pro Artist, and when I did research in buying this part, this actually appears to be the generic factory which makes the coolers for Scythe, which is usually known as a company which operates in Japan, but all their coolers are still manufactured in China. And Pro Artist seems to be the factory which makes all these coolers. So it's not hot to the touch at all. It's pretty cool here. Everything here is nice and nothing is hot to the touch. And of course, for the intake, I have 2 fans over here. They are working as intake, and of course I use intake so I can cool down the RAM modules over here, get fresh air to the CPU, pass it back. I also have a fan in the back over here. I don't have any fans feeding the GPU, but it has a big enough gap where it can pull enough air. So I have really no thermal issues in this system at all. It's just the noise of the CPU cooler can be quite overwhelming, so I'm hoping to alleviate that with the Noctua. All right, so going over to the numbers here in idle. So I'm running 900K at 5.1 gigahertz. I do not see any reason to go much higher, and I'm running it's just a very mild undervolt on the B660. So it's pulling about 30 watts in idle, and you can see it's idling at 40 watts or something. So in order to make the testing more or less valid, let me put back my cover here so it can be in a realistic situation. If I test it with the cover off, it more or less makes no sense. So of course the Johnsbow case comes with a very appropriate glass cover here. Usually it comes with a traditional glass cover, but I actually found that this is mesh. So this is a mesh material, and these are held in from to where the panel would be by magnets. You can actually buy kits of these here in China. It's cheap. So for only a few bucks, you just cut yourself this netting, put the magnets in the edges, and you can make yourself more or less fully mesh side panel, which you can still see inside, and it actually creates this sort of shade effect where the RGB shines quite a bit through actually. So I really much prefer having this mesh material over here, because you really get a benefit of having more air in the build in general, and it doesn't really sacrifice the looks that much. It's not like I'm going to be staring at the computer all the time. I can see my RGB if I want to, and my components enjoy really nice fresh air. It's really nice for thermals, switching to this mesh material. So adding the mesh material, now you can see we increased the temperature about 2 or 3 degrees, so now it's idling at 44, and we're still at 30 watts. So indeed, if you add the mesh material, you do increase the temperature by a bit, because there's of course less airflow compared to no material. But I can tell you that definitely having the glass side panel really does increase the temperatures in my experience. So let's go ahead and run some tests. So this is the first test we're going to run. It's just traditional Cinebench R23. So remember, my 3900K over here has all the E-cores off. I do have the ring clock set to 5 gigahertz, and I only have a very slight undervolt. Looking at the temperatures here, we get about 80 degrees, 85. And in my experience, I can get up to 90, 92. I never get to 100 quite. And we're pulling about 170 watts, right? So 87, and that's more or less the noise you are expecting here. So as you can see, it's still like 88. It really doesn't touch 90 degrees, 100 degrees at all. And we get about 20,000 points, right? 20,000 points. So this is more or less what I can do with this cooler. If you were going to play games, a very intensive game, this is the worst case scenario, 1.24. So it's running pretty nice, I would say. I have no complaints about it. So again, 20,454 points. So let's try to run a video game and see what's what. So we're back, and this is a more realistic load for this build. So we're going to try to run the Monster Hunter Wilds benchmark. So it's 720p lowest settings. We're going to try to hammer the CPU as much as possible, and we're going to see what happens to the temperatures now that we have the GPU working in tandem. So this is one of the most intensive CPU games I've tried in a bit. And let's see, so we're about 120 watts, so we're getting up to 80 degrees, so it's toasty. It's getting kind of toasty, but our cores are all still locked at 5.1 gigahertz, no problem, and it's running fine. I would say it's running pretty fine, and we're gonna just let it do the thing. And I'm going to report if I see any anomalies. So remember, this maximum, I think we got it when we were running Cinebench. Now we're running a game, so it should be quite different. And I also want to say that I think this particular game is also very demanding on the storage front, because I have hit a hard wall with this game specifically, where it doesn't matter if I increase the clock speed, it doesn't matter if I lower my latency, it doesn't seem to ever go beyond a certain threshold. So I don't know if it's the bandwidth. DDR4 4000 just gives me a hard limit on the score and the frame rates I can get, especially the minimum frame rates, or if it's the storage. I'm using Gen 4 storage, not Gen 5. So there seems to be some other factor in this game where you get a hard cap on your performance, and I honestly don't know what it could be. So let's just keep the game running, and I will come back and report and see the score and see what happens to the temperatures. As a point of reference, this is the noise at this exact moment with the generic cooler. So I will let you just listen to it for a bit. So we are approaching more or less the end of the test here. There was really no variation at all in the temperatures here. So we were usually really in the between 70 and 80 degrees all the time. So we got 42,445. So with this cooler right here, and just before I switch to the Noctua one, I want to do a final test with the E-course on, so you can see what the worst case scenario is for this generic dual tower. So I'm going to reboot my system, turn on the E-course, and see what is what. So let's go and do that now. All right, so welcome back. So we have now turned on all the E-cores. You can see them here. So I have them all limited to 3.9 gigahertz all core, and still sticking with the 5.1 gigahertz all core on the P cores. And I have set the ring clock in this configuration to 4700 megahertz. And as you can see, we're still idling at about 44, 46 Celsius. Unless I start to stress the system, it's of course the temperature is going to go up, and we're still pulling about 30 watts at idle, right? So I'm still applying the same mild undervolt, but I just want to preface this by saying that this is with E-cores. I have not fully tuned the system. It's just using the same configuration as my P-cores only mode, only with the E-cores enabled and the ring clock slightly adjusted downward. And our V-core is sitting at 1.2 volts at idle, which is pretty good, I think. So I'm going to show you the absolute worst case scenario for this cooler. So we're going to try to run Cinebench here. So remember, this is the generic Chinese cooler over here. So let's try to run multi-core, see what happens. You can see we're already 89, 94 degrees, so we really start to stress it out. We're at 266 watts and we hit the thermal limit, right? So we're throttling now, unfortunately. So this is not a good sign at all. B-core 1.3, still the voltage is still fine. It's a bit high. I should probably undervolt quite a bit more in this mode. I haven't tried tuning the system with E-cores on, but we really did jump all the way to 100 watts, and our score is 36,800 points. Of course, I'm not getting the full 40,000 points because remember, my clocks are lower than the usual stock 3900K because of my undervolt, right? But if you were to, let's say, limit the power to 200, let's say 220 watts, this cooler right here can handle it. It's just when you get to above 250, it's too much, man. You see, it's 255, and that's it. That's the most this thing can cool. But I think for a generic Chinese cooler, this cooler costed me $30 when I bought this one. For a generic Chinese cooler, you have to admit, this is a pretty good score, man. And I'm pretty sure if you just adjust the power to the correct amount, I'm pretty sure you can still get, at the very least, like 34,000 easy. And for gaming, it's enough. This cooler can keep it cool enough for gaming. So let's go ahead and now try to run Monster Hunter Wilds to see if there's any improvement, or if the temperatures go higher, if I get a higher score because of having more cores. So let's see what happens with that benchmark. Let's go do that. Okay, so welcome back. So we have Monster Hunter Wilds running again, the benchmark, and we are still with all the E-cores enabled. So you can see 5.1 gigahertz on the P cores, 3.9 on the E cores. So as you can see, just idling in the menu, we are getting significantly higher temperatures and power consumption. I believe it really is pulling more power just by having the E-cores on. And we did lose quite a bit of ring clock by enabling the E-cores, right? So we're going to try and just run the benchmark and see what happens to our temperatures and our power consumption, if there is an improvement in frame rate or whatever. So this is getting toasty, man. 100 watts, Jesus Christ. So it is pulling quite a bit. Look at that, 88C. So it is pulling quite a bit more power. So it would be interesting to see that if now that we're pulling more power, I guess it's using more cores or something. So I want to know, am I going to get an increased score now that I have the E-cores on? But my ring clock, it was decreased compared to what I had it on without the P-cores enabled. So 150 watts, so it is pulling significantly more power here, so 80 degrees. And of course, it's making significantly more noise. So we are going to let the benchmark run finish, and 90 degrees, look at that. And I'm going to set down the camera so you can listen to the noise, and we are going to put all that data together before we switch to the D15. All right, so I'm gonna put you down now. All right, so this is the noise of the generic Chinese cooler with all the E-cores enabled while running Monster Hunter Wilds. The temperature right now is 78, 80, 82, so power consumption is still 150 watts, so she is pulling power, man. She's pulling power. So go ahead and take a listen. Alrighty, so we're coming up already close to the end of the benchmark run. So I did see the temperatures here climb maybe to 85 in the most intense moments, and we're mostly sticking to 150 watts of power consumption, and the noise level was just as you heard, and we got 42,413. So I do not think there was really any difference between having the E-cores off or the E-cores on in this particular game, especially in the score. But of course the power consumption is much higher with the E-cores on. So it is doing something. I just don't know what the hell is it doing. But anyway, so that is the base performance of this cooler. It's still going, man. So that is the base performance of this cooler. For me, this is totally fine, but I understand for a lot of people, probably this is too loud or it sounds scary, but for me it's normal. It just means it's doing the thing. So let's go ahead and exit the benchmark, and I'm gonna try to just go ahead and now install the D15, and we're gonna do the comparisons. So let's go do that now. Okay, so just as an aside here, so I've just removed the previous generic cooler, and I do see that I did have trouble with the thermal paste application. So as you can see, most of the left side was very thoroughly covered while the paste was a bit thin over here. So it is quite likely that that single core throttling was actually because the application was not that good. So that previous cooler was working with a very shitty application of thermal paste, and it was still doing pretty well. So it goes to show that even a generic cooler can do really well even in high power workloads. So not bad at all. But now we're gonna go ahead and put on the Noctua and see if we get any improvements at all. Okay, so I just finished installing the Noctua bracket. It was actually pretty easy. Thankfully, this is a really good case because you actually have full access to the back side of the motherboard. So for me, it was just very easy. I could just swap out the old previous mounting hardware. It's Pro Artist, so this is the brand I was using in the previous one. I will compare the two colors in a bit, so you can see the mounting hardware is significantly different, but it was very easy to just replace it thanks to this case. So if you're looking for a really good case, the Johnspell V32 Pro is compact and very easy to replace components in. So pretty nice. Let's go ahead, do a test fit, and I will now compare the two coolers. So now we have the actual comparison between the two coolers. So this is my generic Pro Artist dual tower cooler, and here is the D15, right? So the Noctua D15, and you can see that there is indeed some difference in size indeed. So this is the way you would mount them, right? It says Noctua indeed. So this is the way you would mount them. So the airflow goes this way and the air passes through here. So as you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 6 heat pipes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 heat pipes here. So they're both 6 heat pipes in each tower, but indeed the Pro Artist cooler is significantly smaller and also not as thick or as heavy as this is. Actually, they're maybe about the similar weight. It's the weight difference is not that large, but you can see that the surface area covered by the actual fins here there is a significant difference there. And if I can show you the bottom here of the two coolers, you can see that here you just make direct contact with the 6 heat pipes. There is nothing there, and well, here you have an actual cold plate there. So there you go. The Pro Artist cooler is from what I could see, really just the Fuma 2 with different color scheme, but it's more or less the Fuma 2. Just the fans are louder than the ones I remember from the regular Fuma 2, so I think they went with some higher performing fans at the expense of extra noise. But as you could see, it was still performing quite well even with my i9 there. And of course the NHD15, we are going to be using the 14 mil, which are included with the cooler. So it is significantly larger, and it does feel quite a bit more premium than my cooler here. But remember, this one was around $30 when I bought it. This one has been $50, but it was used, right? So I bought this one used, assuming that people are going to get FOMO over trying to buy the G2. And it seems that I was more or less correct. You can start to find even some Chromax D15s in the market. So let's go ahead, install this bad boy in the system and see what's what. All right, so here is the finished product. So we have the D15 already installed. So it was quite a bit of a tight fit. It actually, like, if there is no fan in it, it's very easy to put the graphics card in, because my graphics card, it has quite a bit of a thick back plate over here, but the fan also fits fine. It's just the clip which is causing a bit of friction here. So the cooler is actually not touching the graphics card at all. It's just the clip here made it a bit tight. So I had to shift the fan just a little bit up. I don't know if you can see it, but it's not sitting flush against the cooler as it usually does. I just shifted it up a little bit and it fits absolutely fine. So I have everything installed. I can still see my RGB since I don't have the second fan obstructing it, but I still have the splitter installed back there in case I want to go ahead and just put the second fan over here and try if it helps the thermals at all. But the way I'm going to use it at this moment is basically going to be like the usual D15S, I guess. So we're gonna go ahead, close this up, hook up the machine, and we're gonna see how the temperatures are doing with the D15 versus the generic cooler. Let's go do that. All right, so I just did a stability test using Cinebench for quite a while actually, and she did thermal throttle. So eventually I did hit 100 degrees, but it took almost 7 minutes for the cooler to get to that point. So the Noctua cooler is actually good and quite a big difference compared to my previous one, even though I'm using it in single fan mode, which is quite impressive. So I kept it going for 10 minutes and eventually it did settle in into lower clock speed. So I think it settled at 4.8 on the P course and I think 3.6 on the 3.6 or 3.7 on the E course. So it did settle in at the lower all core rate eventually with Cinebench, and it was the Noctua cooler was keeping her cool at around 92 degrees or so about. So man, Noctua is actually pretty legit. I was not expecting that this cooler was this good. So just to have a bit of a sanity check, let me run just one multi-core session so you can see the score. So let's do start, and we're gonna see the core speeds are going to keep 5.1, 3.9, and you can see the temperatures 87, 88, 89. Now it takes time for it to become saturated, and if I was thinking that this is a bursty load, and look, it's like 260 watts, which is way over the limit of what I would use personally on this smaller rig. If I just limit it to 253 watts or even less, the Noctua cooler can do it just fine. And of course our score is now higher, almost kissing 37,000 points. And this is with a really bad underbolt, because remember, I dialed in my underbolts for no E course at all. So this is the worst case scenario for this cooler at the moment, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and with the E course on, run Monster Hunter Wilds so we can compare it to how the previous cooler was. But you can see, damn, this is so efficient, man. So at the moment it's completely inaudible. The other one was also inaudible, but it's completely inaudible. Like the Noctua fan really tries to minimize the amount of spin it has to do. So in terms of noise, I can still hear it, to be honest. But at some point, I don't know if it's the noise of the Noctua cooler or the noise of my case fans, because my case fans are still tied to the CPU temperature, so I have them blowing in more air. So I want my memory sticks to always be cool enough so they are always blowing air down when the CPU is going higher tilt. So far I'm pretty happy with this. It's just a single fan. I'm pretty surprised, especially for a smaller setup like this. It's actually pretty impressive. So I'm gonna go ahead, run Monster Hunter Wilds, and we're gonna compare it to the previous cooler. So let's go do that. Okay, so we're back. Now we're gonna test the Monster Hunter Wilds benchmark. So she is running now. This is a realistic gaming load. So let's take a look. So she's pulling 120 watts, and we're sitting at around 65 degrees, 68, and we're gonna see how that number climbs on with the Noctua cooler. So we still get 80 degrees, 75, so very similar temperatures to what I was getting. So 150 watts over here, 77. So how to say, the Noctua cooler is indeed handling the CPU temperatures quite a bit better than the other one. But if I had to say, the sound footprint is actually not that different from my previous one. To be honest, the sound of the Noctua is more pleasant because it sounds more like just siphoning air instead of, I don't know, the pitch of the Noctua is more pleasant to listen at. And to be honest, I think most people would already deem this to be quite silent. I don't think most people would think this is loud or annoying, and I guess it's fine. And of course, remember, this is the worst case scenario. We still have all the E-cores on 3.9, and we still have the lock of the P-cores at 5.1. So if you remember, this was the worst case scenario for my previous cooler. And I don't know if the fan is running at full tilt. Oh, there it is. So it's running at about 1500 RPM, the Noctua cooler, which I guess it's full tilt, I guess. Isn't it full tilt for the Noctuas? So it's running at 100% speed, and Actually, not bad. The sound profile is not bad, and it's like now it drops to 72. So I guess it's fine. And of course, we also need to remember that I'm not running the cooler with the two fans as most people do, right? So this is just a single fan configuration, and it is still pretty good at keeping my system cool. Uh, so if anyone is worried about the 4090, I can show you the data here. So you can see that I have a pretty aggressive undervolt because I don't care much for high power consumption, but we're sitting at 48 degrees on the core, which is, it's nothing. You can see far less than 1 volt. For me, this is the sweet spot for my card. I don't need to go any higher. And yeah, I mean, the system as it is now, I think there's nothing else to improve, man. Like that's it. I don't think if I put an AIO here, I don't think it would improve any more than it is right now. Particularly because I am constrained by the footprint of the build. So remember, this is trying to be a smallish form factor build, so I am constrained just by the sheer size of the thing. And I think this is more or less the best case scenario I'm gonna get for this build. And I feel quite safe keeping it air cooled. I really thought about getting an AIO, at least a cheap one, but when I saw this used Noctua, I just thought, you know what, I might as well just try to get it and see what's what. And the good thing is it works pretty well. I'm pretty happy, and I can still see my RGB. Yeah, so I'm gonna let you listen for a bit to the sound profile, and then I'm gonna go back and turn off the E-cores to my previous gaming config. So I'm gonna let you listen to the fans now. So by the end of the benchmark, we were sitting at about 70 degrees and about similar power consumption, 150 watts on the CPU. And we got a slightly higher score, but I do not for a second believe our score went up due to the cooler. It's just run to run variance. It's just the way of the game. So I think that this Noctua is pretty good. Even with a single fan, you can do so much. And remember, the fan here, if I can show you, is running at full tilt. So let me see if I can find it again. So this is GPU fans. Where is the CPU fan? Let's see. I apologize for this. Oh, here it is. So 1390 RPM. So it's more or less running a full tilt, I think, 1500 for the Noctuas. And my CPU, so my case fans, these two at the top, are probably the ones most responsible for the noise in the build, to be honest. So these two and the one in the back, these are probably the ones responsible for most of the noise, and not the Noctua, if I had to guess, because the sound profile completely changed just by changing to the Noctua cooler. This is just trying to show you what happens when you add more and more power. So actually, if I had to compare this to the previous cooler, yes, the Noctua performs better, and it's much better at mitigating thermal throttling. It takes a long time to throttle on the Noctua in Cinebench. You had to do over 5 minutes on this one to get the throttling. Well, on the other one, it would just throttle almost immediately, even on the first run, right? So it is quite a bit more effective at cooling the CPU, but even if you still keep it for 5 minutes running at full tilt with unlocked power, it will eventually throttle, especially when it gets to the 270 watt mark. So you do need to undervolt and put a power limit on the CPU, which I have dialed it in for having no E-cores, but I haven't tuned it correctly while I still have the E-cores on. So you can think of this as really the worst case scenario when everything is running. Alright boys, welcome back. So we are back now on the PC. So we have turned off the E-cores and I have turned back the ring clock to 5 gigahertz, and this was the original setup I was using without the E-cores. So the real goal of getting this cooler was to see if I would get an improvement in the sound profile and the temperatures when I was using it in my regular gaming profile. So we are gonna first hammer it with some Cinebench and see how it does. There we go. So we're getting to 83. So it's 83, 80 degrees. We're pulling about 170 watts, right? So it's quite similar to my previous cooler, except now we don't even touch 90 degrees, right? So at least not that easily. We're still under 90 degrees quite comfortably. So that's pretty based actually. That's pretty good. And probably the Noctua is running at full tilt. Now the sound profile of it all, I can still hear the fans, and to be honest, I really think the vast majority of the noise coming from my PC is just from the case fans, but I'm not gonna compromise on those. Like, the case fans are really important for keeping my memory cool. And we're getting about 20,000 points here in Cinebench, which is more or less the same as I was before. So there was no difference here. So we're gonna go ahead and run Monster Hunter Wilds and see what's what. All right, so we're back with the Monster Hunter Wilds benchmark, 720p and lowest settings, because we are trying to hammer the CPU as much as possible. And of course, realistically, you would never play Monster Hunter Wilds at that ridiculously low resolution. So just keep that in mind, that this is a completely unrealistic test for the way you would play the game, but whatever, I'm just trying to see what's what. So you can see that we are indeed pulling quite a bit less power, so we're sitting at about 120 watts here with just the P cores, and we are hitting about 70 degrees, which it's actually pretty cool. 24, but it's not a big deal. And to be honest, there is really an audible difference in the fans. It's not as heavy as it was before. My wife used to feel like, Jesus, it sounds like it's going to explode or something or fly away. And now it just sounds like a flow of air, just full, it's just blowing, which is actually pretty nice and not annoying at all to the ears. So this is actually pretty good. I'm actually pretty happy about this. And to show you again, the Noctua is running at full tilt, is 1500 RPM. So it's still running at full tilt, but it's keeping the CPU pretty cool. Look at that, 3 on the, you cannot see it. Let me go up. There we go. So it's keeping it pretty cool. The package is sitting at about 73, and that's actually pretty nice. The cores are all locked, 5.1, there's no issues there. So this is pretty damn cool, man. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you listen to the fans for a bit, and we're gonna skip to the end of the benchmark and then draw a conclusion. So I'll let you listen to the fans now. So I think it's time for everyone's favorite conclusion time. So that was the NHD15 by Noctua, the Chromax. So let me bring it in to the camera. So here it is. So would I advise you to buy this over a generic dual fan cooler? So I actually, it really depends on the TDP you're trying to cool. Always, it depends, right? It's a really cop-out answer. So when I bought that cooler, Originally, it was meant to cool like an i7-12700, which is a locked TDP part. I was assuming that I was only going to cool 125 watts. And for 125 watts, that dual tower cooler was perfectly fine. And like I said, it was $30 when I bought it. It was not very expensive. The build quality on it is pretty good. It really matches the Side Fuma 2, which is what I had back when I was living in Japan. So it's just a one-to-one recreation of the Side Fuma 2. It's exactly the same from the same factory. So it's a pretty good cooler, but when you start to run a 99 3900K on unlocked part at full tilt, it really starts to fall apart. It cannot do very well over 220 watts. It's really struggling to keep it there. I would guess the maximum it tops out is about 180 watts, which is the worst case scenario for gaming if you saw when I turned on the e-cores with Monster Hunter Wilds. So you ideally want to get probably a bigger cooler. Maybe one of the thermal ride new coolers is more than enough to 180 watts. So I definitely could have bought a thermal ride um, or a deep cool, since I live in China. It's very easy to get these parts. But when I was looking around in the used market, I just saw this Noctua, the Chromax Black NHD 15 for 100 yuan, so $50. And I thought, you know what, for $50, I want to try it because everyone sings their praises of this cooler, right? Everyone says this is the best, or it was the gold standard of air coolers before the G2 came out. And I assume that probably people with FOMO were going to start selling their old Noctuas to buy the new one. And I'm guessing this is why I was able to pick this one up. So whoever owned this one before I did now really took care of it. It was free of dust. Everything was perfectly fine. Just the cooler in the box, there were some missing items. I didn't have the screwdriver. I only had the mounting bracket for LGA 1700, not the other mounting brackets, but it's whatever. I can get the mounting hardware easily anyway. So for $50 and the way it's set up now, it did improve my cooling performance. It did improve the acoustics of my build, and I do feel like this is going to last me for quite a bit longer. I probably do not see myself ever increasing the TDP of my parts in the future. I probably want to downsize them actually. So if you think that now I'm topping out at 180 watts while gaming purely as a gaming focus, I think that's fine. But if I wanted to go full workstation, this cooler can clearly deal even with 200, let's say 220, 30-ish watts. To be honest, I would like to say that it deals with 250 watts just fine, and it seems to do it just fine. Even at that level of power, it seems to deal with it just fine. But you definitely need to tune your system on the undervolt, maybe underclock a little bit. But if you were using a lower power part, maybe the new Core Ultras, I'm pretty sure this Noctua is more than enough to cool them. They pull less power than Raptor Lake ever did. So would I advise you to buy one of these if you want to cool an i9 like I am? Would I advise you to buy one of these? To be honest, I don't know, because you can actually get IOs for a similar price than I paid for this. This is a very expensive cooler. When it's new, if I had to pay $100 for this, I would not pay for that. To be honest, I would not pay $100 for this. $50, I considered it only because the internet keeps saying it's the GOAT, it's the best cooler that was ever made. And it's pretty base. It's just a single fan. It can cool pretty well an i9 in a smallish form factor build. So it's pretty okay. But I would only because I had to pay $50 for it, right? If I had to pay $100, I would really start to consider buying something else, maybe an AIO or something. But on the other hand, I'm not an AIO person. I personally feel uncomfortable putting water around my PC. Even though I water cooled a Radeon 7, I still did it in a way that if it was going to leak, it was not going to hurt any other components. I'm sure you can do it the same way for a CPU, but I don't want to mess with water cooling if I don't have to. If I really don't have to, why should I mess with it, right? So it's pretty based. I'm pretty happy. Just a single fan. It cools it fine. I'm very happy with the way the sound profile was improved with this new cooler. I really felt there was a nice improvement in the noise profile of the build, especially for pure gaming. So I'm happy with my purchase, man. So used used NHD. If you really want to try it, buy it used, man. People said Noctua is one of the most reliable brands. So if they are really that reliable, 10-year warranty or whatever, you should be able to pick it up used and it should work, right? That's my opinion, and that's what I did, and it worked fine. And the price was fair. The performance is good. The noise profile is good. So I'm pretty happy with my purchase, man. And well, this was a long video, but I hope my testing maybe helps you to form an opinion. If it doesn't, whatever. It's just something I wanted to do for myself, and I really wanted to put the cooler through its paces and touch base as to whether this was a good purchase or not. I think it was a good purchase for me personally, but honestly, I didn't really need to buy it. Performance wise, my previous cooler was still dealing with the heat fine. It was, of course, throttling when you were running full tilt with the E-cores on. Now I see some semblance where I can turn on E-cores and not get as aggressive throttling, but I'm not going to do that anyway because this is a pure gaming build. So yeah, I got what I wanted. Lower temperatures, lower nose profile. Single fan is fine for cooling this build. Pretty nice. So that's it. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry for the long video, but it actually took me an entire day to do all these tests, take out my old cooler, put the new one in, especially because the build is so small. So it took an entire day to film and put together and do everything. So I hope you liked it. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.